It was a bright, cloudless morning in Riverside, a quiet town where nothing out of the ordinary ever seemed to happen. The streets were lined with quaint houses, and people went about their daily routines, sipping coffee, greeting neighbors, and going about their business. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over everything. The air smelled fresh, filled with the scent of spring flowers and new beginnings. For many, it was just another peaceful day. Sarah, a 60-year-old woman, strolled leisurely down the sidewalk, her loyal companion, Max, trotting alongside her. Max, her German shepherd, was more than just a pet. He had been by her side for years, a constant source of support and a protector in every sense of the word. He was Sarah's rock, her source of comfort, love, and companionship. Today was just another one of their routine walks, a simple moment in time that would, unbeknownst to Sarah, soon become a pivotal one. As they made their way down the familiar path toward the park, Sarah's thoughts wandered. She noticed the rustling leaves, the occasional chirp of a bird, and the soft sound of Max's paws padding along the concrete. Everything felt normal, too normal. She stepped off the curb without a second thought, trusting the quiet street, trusting that nothing would disrupt the peace. But then it happened. Out of nowhere, the screech of tires filled the air. A car, speeding around the corner, appeared in Sarah's peripheral vision. The driver was too distracted to see her standing there, oblivious to the danger that loomed just ahead. Time seemed to slow down in that instant, as if the world was holding its breath. Max, who had always been keenly aware of his surroundings, noticed the car before Sarah did. In a split second, he reacted, his body launching forward with the speed and precision of a trained protector. Without hesitation, Max threw himself in front of Sarah, pushing her out of the way with all his strength, sending them both tumbling to the ground. The car's tires screeched as it swerved, narrowly missing Sarah. But it wasn't quick enough. The vehicle collided with Max, sending him sprawling across the pavement. Chaos erupted. People screamed, rushing to help, but Max's body lay motionless, his side bloodied, his breathing shallow. Sarah, dazed and terrified, scrambled to her knees, heart pounding in her chest. "Max!" she cried, her voice cracking as she reached for him. But even in that moment of pain and fear, Max's eyes, though dimmed by the impact, still held a spark of loyalty and determination. He had done it. He had saved her life. As the crowd gathered around, unsure of what to do, Sarah cradled Max in her arms, tears streaming down her face. She could hardly believe what had just happened. Max, her brave, loyal companion, had thrown himself in harm's way to protect her. What happened next would leave everyone in shock. Max's act of heroism had set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. His loyalty, his unwavering devotion, was about to be tested in ways neither he nor Sarah could have imagined. And this was only the beginning. Sarah had lived in Riverside for most of her life, and in the quiet town where everyone knew everyone, she was a familiar face. At 60 years old, she had seen the ebb and flow of life's challenges. From the loss of loved ones to the bittersweet moments of watching her children grow up and leave the nest, Sarah had weathered it all. But she had always been someone who put others first, whether it was helping a neighbor with their groceries or lending a listening ear to a friend in need. Her compassion was well known throughout the town, and many considered her a pillar of the community. Though Sarah had faced her fair share of hardships, she had always remained strong. Her resilience was rooted in the deep bonds she had formed over the years, none more important than the one with Max. Max wasn't just a dog to Sarah, he was her anchor. He had been by her side through the hardest moments in her life, and together they had weathered storms, both literal and emotional. She had adopted him when he was just a puppy, and from that moment on, their lives had intertwined in a way that could only be described as inseparable. Sarah still remembered the day she first met Max. She had walked into the shelter on a whim, not really planning to adopt a dog, but something about the puppy's wide, intelligent eyes and the way he bounded over to her had sealed the deal. She'd taken him home that very day, and from that moment on, He had never left her side. Max had grown up to be an extraordinary German shepherd, known for his intelligence, loyalty, and unwavering protectiveness. He wasn't just her pet, he was her confidant, her guardian, her best friend. Over the years, Max had seen Sarah through the darkest of times. When she lost her husband, when her children had moved away, and during the quiet nights when loneliness threatened to creep in. In those moments, Max was there, with his soft, understanding eyes, always knowing when Sarah needed a nudge of comfort or a warm paw on her lap. Max's presence had always been a comfort to Sarah. He didn't just sense her emotions, he understood them. He was by her side when she cried, sitting quietly, his head resting on her feet as if to say, "I'm here, and you're not alone." And when joy filled the air, Max was there to share in it, wagging his tail, bounding around with a playful energy that reminded Sarah of the simple joys of life. But it wasn't just during the hard times that Max proved his worth. He was her constant companion in all things, whether it was taking walks down the street, running errands, or simply sitting beside her on the porch while she sipped her tea and watched the world go by. Their days had fallen into a comfortable routine, with Max always by her side, providing not only protection but an unwavering sense of security and companionship. Over the years, Sarah had come to realize that Max wasn't just any dog, he was family. He had become such an integral part of her life that the thought of life without him was unimaginable. There was an unspoken trust between them. Max knew that Sarah would always look out for him, and Sarah knew that Max would always protect her, no matter the cost. That deep bond had been forged in quiet moments, in shared glances and gentle touches. It was in the way Max would nudge his nose into her hand when he sensed she was feeling down, or the way he would leap to action whenever he sensed danger. Max's love wasn't a quiet, passive affection. It was an active love, one that moved with purpose, one that acted when it was needed most. Max's intelligence had always been striking. He wasn't just loyal, he was keenly aware of his surroundings, able to sense danger before it ever reached Sarah. His protective instincts were unmatched. He had been trained to respond in ways that many dogs could not, and he did so with a calm assurance that made Sarah feel safe, even when the world seemed chaotic. Max had seen Sarah at her most vulnerable. He had watched her grieve after losing her husband, seen her through the difficult days that followed, and stood watch as she picked up the pieces of her life. But what had always amazed her was the way Max never faltered in his devotion to her. His loyalty was unwavering. He was never more than a few feet away, ready to act if necessary, ready to comfort her when she needed it most. And so, on that particular morning, as they went for their daily walk, the bond they shared seemed as natural as breathing. Sarah had no idea that this walk, this seemingly normal, quiet moment, would soon be turned on its head, and Max would do something no one could have anticipated. As they walked side by side down the familiar path, Sarah felt a calm that only Max could provide. The sun was warm on her face, and the breeze was light, carrying with it the scent of blooming flowers. She looked down at Max, his head held high, his ears alert, and her heart swelled with affection for the dog who had been her loyal companion through thick and thin. There was no doubt in her mind that Max was more than just a pet. He was a protector, a guardian, and a friend, a family member in every sense of the word. She smiled, reaching down to scratch him behind the ears, and Max turned his head, his eyes soft and trusting. He leaned into her touch as if to say, "I've got you, just like always." Little did Sarah know, that moment of comfort and connection would soon give way to something far more intense, a moment that would test the very limits of their bond and change both of their lives forever. Riverside was the kind of town that seemed to exist outside of time. Nestled among rolling hills and sprawling fields, it had an old-world charm that invited slow walks down tree-lined streets, where the only rush came from the occasional car passing by. Everyone knew everyone else, and the rhythm of the town was marked by familiar sights: the butcher's smiling face behind the counter, the children's laughter spilling out from the school playground, and the elderly couple sitting on their porch swing, waving to passers-by. There was a certain tranquility in Riverside, A quiet peace that made it feel like nothing bad could ever happen. For Sarah, Riverside was home, a place where she felt safe, where she had built a life, and where she spent her days in quiet contentment. It was the kind of town that welcomed you to take your time, to stop and smell the roses, literally. She had lived here most of her life, and the familiarity of the streets, the houses, and the faces around town comforted her. Every morning, like clockwork, she would take Max for a walk. They would leave their cozy little house at the edge of town and stroll along the winding paths that led to the park, the lake, and beyond. It was their routine, and Sarah cherished it. The sun would just be starting to climb in the sky, casting its golden glow across the streets, the warmth kissing her skin as she and Max made their way through their usual route. The air smelled fresh, like the earth after a light rain, and the birds chirped in the tall oak trees that lined the street. The scent of freshly mowed grass and blooming flowers mingled in the breeze, creating the perfect backdrop for their morning walks. Sarah would often catch herself smiling as she walked, taking in the simple beauty of it all. The rhythm of the town, the slow pace, the familiar faces, the easy conversations with neighbors, had always been a comfort. It made her feel grounded, as though everything was just as it should be. With Max by her side, Sarah felt a sense of peace that could only come from knowing that, no matter what, she wasn't alone. Max, of course, was always by her side. His coat was a striking shade of sable, his body muscular and poised, his eyes sharp and alert. He walked with purpose, his head held high, ears pricked as he surveyed the surroundings. It wasn't that he was overly anxious or nervous. Max was simply vigilant, always aware of the world around him. He had a natural instinct to protect, and that instinct had been honed through years of companionship with Sarah. Max's role on their walks had always been clear. While Sarah took in the sights, the vibrant colors of the flowers along the side of the road, the children laughing in the park, the slow-moving cars that passed by, Max's focus was elsewhere. His sharp eyes scanned the sidewalks, his nose twitched, catching every scent on the wind. He wasn't just walking for exercise. He was on alert, constantly assessing his environment. Every so often, he would glance up at Sarah, as though checking in, ensuring that she was safe and well. There was no fear in his movements, no sign of anxiousness, only a quiet confidence that he was doing what he was born to do, protect. And Sarah, for her part, had come to rely on Max's instincts. There was an unspoken understanding between them. While she enjoyed the peacefulness of the walk, she knew that if anything unusual were to happen, Max would be the first to sense it. He was more than just a dog. He was a guardian, a sentinel who stood between her and the world, always watching, always listening, and always ready to act if necessary. That morning, as Sarah and Max walked down their usual path, everything felt perfect. The sky was clear, the sun warm but not too hot, and the breeze had a gentle coolness to it. The world seemed to be in balance, and Sarah couldn't help but feel grateful for the simplicity of it all. She glanced down at Max, who was trotting alongside her, his powerful body moving in sync with hers. He turned his head toward her, giving her a brief, affectionate nudge with his nose, and she smiled, rubbing his head gently. They had been walking this route for years, and it had become a part of their routine, a ritual almost. Each step felt like a small piece of comfort, a moment of calm that Sarah could carry with her through the day. They didn't need words to communicate. Their bond was deeper than that. She trusted him completely, and she knew that no matter what happened, Max would always be there. But today, as they reached the intersection, everything changed. As Sarah stepped off the curb, a flash of movement caught Max's attention. His ears shot up and his body tensed. He sniffed the air, then turned his head, his gaze locking onto something in the distance. Sarah, lost in the moment, didn't notice the car speeding toward them from around the corner. Max's senses had already picked up on the danger, and in an instant, his protective instincts kicked in. Without warning, Max darted forward, pushing Sarah out of the way with the force of his body. She stumbled, caught off guard, but before she could even process what was happening, the car was nearly upon them. the screech of tires, the sound of metal crunching. It all happened so fast, and yet, it felt as though time had slowed down. Max had acted instinctively, throwing himself in harm's way to save Sarah. The impact was swift, and Max was sent sprawling to the ground. The car veered off course, narrowly missing Sarah, but Max had taken the brunt of the force. His body lay motionless on the road, and Sarah's heart raced as she scrambled to his side. It all happened so quickly. One moment, everything was peaceful, calm, serene, and the next, chaos had erupted. Max had saved her life. Sarah could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her breath ragged as she reached for Max, her hands trembling. She wasn't sure what was happening. Her mind was still trying to catch up to the events unfolding before her. All she knew was that Max had acted with such fierce devotion and courage, putting himself between her and certain danger. The dog she had raised, the dog she had loved for so many years, had done the unimaginable. It was only then that Sarah realized the full extent of their bond. She wasn't just walking alongside Max. She wasn't just a human with a dog. She was a woman with a protector, a guardian who had given everything to save her. And this, she realized, was only the beginning of their journey. The morning was serene, the world moving at its usual, slow pace. Riverside was the kind of town where time seemed to slow down, and nothing ever happened in a rush. As Sarah and Max walked down their usual route, the sun hung high, casting a golden hue over the street, and the sounds of birds chirping in the trees created a soothing melody. It was just another calm day in Riverside, until the unthinkable happened. Sarah's thoughts were filled with the peaceful rhythm of their walk, unaware that just around the corner, a car was speeding toward them. She reached the crosswalk at the corner of Oak and Main Street, her eyes momentarily lost in the distant landscape. Max, on the other hand, had his eyes sharply trained ahead, alert as always. He was more than just a dog. He was Sarah's protector, ever watchful, his senses finely tuned to the world around him. Without warning, a piercing screech of tires broke the tranquility of the morning. Sarah froze. Her heart jumped into her throat as she heard the unmistakable sound of rubber burning against pavement. In that split second, she turned her head and saw it, an out-of-control car, barreling around the corner at an alarming speed. The driver, distracted and oblivious, had no idea she was standing there, caught right in the path of his reckless driving. Time seemed to slow as Sarah's brain scrambled to process the situation. The car was too close, the driver too fast. The instinct to move was there, but it was too late. There was no way to avoid the impact. The car would hit her, and there was nothing she could do. Panic surged through her, and her legs froze to the pavement as her mind screamed for action. But in the blink of an eye, Max acted. He had already noticed the car long before Sarah had even heard the tires. Max's instincts kicked in with the precision of a well-trained protector. He rushed forward, moving faster than Sarah had ever seen him move, his powerful muscles propelling him toward her with lightning speed. With a deep growl, he threw himself into the path of the car. Max's body collided with Sarah's, knocking her out of the way and sending them both tumbling to the ground. It all happened so quickly, too quickly for Sarah to even comprehend the gravity of the situation. She hit the pavement hard, the air rushing out of her lungs, but in the chaos, all she could focus on was Max. The car, its driver now in full panic, swerved desperately to avoid them, but it was too late. The side of the vehicle clipped Max, and the sound of impact sent a jolt of terror through Sarah's chest. The car screeched to a halt, and the world fell silent, save for the thumping of Sarah's heart in her ears. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Sarah lay on the ground, dazed, her body aching from the fall, but her focus was solely on Max. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw him lying on the pavement a few feet away, his body motionless. She scrambled to her feet, panic rising in her chest, and rushed to his side. "Max!" she screamed, her voice breaking as she dropped to her knees beside him. His fur was matted with dirt, and his body was twisted in a way that made her stomach lurch. Tears welled in her eyes as she gently reached out to touch him. "Please, Max, please be okay." Max's breathing was shallow, his chest rising and falling with great effort. Sarah's fingers brushed through his thick fur, searching for any signs of life. Her heart pounded in her chest as she whispered his name, urging him to respond. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him, not after everything they had been through together. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, Max's head lifted slightly. His eyes met hers, tired, but still full of the same loyalty that had always been there. There was no fear in his gaze, no sign of pain or distress. Just a quiet reassurance. As if to tell her, "I'm still here. I did what I had to do. You're safe." Sarah's heart broke with a mixture of relief and grief. She gently stroked his head, her hand trembling. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Max's eyes, though still cloudy with the aftermath of the accident, seemed to shine with the same determination they always had. His job wasn't finished. He had kept his promise to protect her, and in doing so, he had put himself in harm's way without a second thought. But Max was still with her. That was all that mattered. The paramedics arrived shortly, and Sarah had to let them take Max away, but every part of her screamed to stay with him. She clung to his side, her fingers brushing through his fur one last time before they loaded him into the ambulance. "Please be okay, Max," she whispered through the tears. She wasn't sure what the outcome would be, but she knew one thing for sure. Max had saved her life. He had acted with a level of bravery and loyalty that could only come from a dog who loved deeply, a dog who considered her life just as important as his own. As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens wailed into the distance, Sarah stood frozen on the street, her heart heavy with a mixture of fear and gratitude. Max had always been more than a dog to her. He was family. He was her protector, her best friend, and today he had proven that nothing would stop him from ensuring her safety. And now, as she made her way to the hospital, her mind kept replaying the moment Max had thrown himself in front of the car, sacrificing his own safety for hers. The realization washed over her. This bond, this unbreakable connection between them, was something far beyond the ordinary. Max was her hero. The screech of the ambulance siren was a sharp, jarring reminder that the world hadn't slowed down. It was still spinning. Max's body lay lifeless on the stretcher, the paramedics working quickly but gently to stabilize him as they loaded him into the back of the ambulance. Sarah, her hands trembling, held onto his fur for just a moment longer before the doors closed with a soft thud. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the vehicle pull away, the sounds of the siren fading into the distance. The calm, peaceful world of Riverside had been shattered, replaced by a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Max had always been the one to protect her, the one who had kept her safe in every possible way. Now, it was her turn to make sure he was okay. But as the ambulance sped toward the hospital, Sarah felt powerless. She wasn't sure what the outcome would be. All she knew was that Max, the dog who had saved her life, was now fighting for his own. The paramedics had done their best, but there was no hiding the extent of Max's injuries. His side was a mess of bruises, his fur matted with blood. There had been no time for them to assess the damage fully, but it was clear that the car had hit him hard. He was strong, but even Max had his limits. He had thrown himself into the line of danger to protect Sarah, and now, the weight of his sacrifice was crashing down on her. When they arrived at the hospital, the ambulance doors flew open and the team moved quickly. Sarah could hardly keep up as they wheeled Max into the emergency room. She followed them inside, not bothering to stop and speak to the staff. She didn't care about the paperwork or the procedures. They were irrelevant right now. All that mattered was Max. She needed to stay with him. She needed to make sure that he was okay. The hospital room was sterile, cold, and bright. The harsh white lights cast a clinical glow over everything, and the sound of machines beeping filled the air, a constant reminder that time was ticking by. The doctors and nurses worked with practiced efficiency, their hands swift and sure as they tended to Max. But through it all, Sarah remained at his side, her heart heavy with worry and love. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him, not after everything he had done for her. Max's body lay motionless on the bed, his side still rising and falling with shallow breaths. The injury to his side was serious. He had been hit with such force that the impact had left him bruised and bloodied, his breathing labored and uneven. A large bandage was wrapped around his abdomen, and a 4-line had been placed in his leg. But despite all of this, Sarah could still see the faint rise and fall of his chest. He was still alive, and that was all that mattered for now. Sarah couldn't stop herself from reaching out, her hand gently brushing Max's head. His fur was soft, even in this sterile environment. She ran her fingers through it, trying to soothe him, as though her touch could heal the wounds that ran deeper than skin. She whispered his name, her voice thick with emotion. "Please, stay with me." She had no idea how much time passed as she sat by his side. Minutes, hours, it didn't matter. Her world had become that sterile room, the soft beeping of the machines, and Max's labored breathing. It felt as if the world outside had ceased to exist. She wasn't ready to face anything else. Not until Max was okay. The doctors kept coming in and out, their faces masked with professional concern. They spoke in hushed tones to each other, noting his condition, adjusting the 4-drip, and taking his vitals. They had reassured Sarah several times that Max was stable for the moment, but nothing could ease the fear gnawing at her heart. The sight of him lying there so still, so vulnerable, was a constant weight pressing down on her chest. It felt as though the bond between her and Max had been forged in that very room. She had known him longer than anyone else. They had shared so many years together, years of love, laughter, companionship, and even sorrow. Max had been there for her through it all, and now, as he lay vulnerable on that hospital bed, she knew that she would do anything to ensure he got through this. As the hours passed, Sarah sat in silence, not wanting to disturb the peace of the room. She would occasionally stroke Max's fur, her hand lingering on his back, wishing that somehow her touch could heal the damage. But deep down, she knew it wasn't enough. She wasn't a doctor, she couldn't fix him. All she could do was wait and pray, and hope that Max's incredible strength would carry him through. A nurse came in to check on Max's condition, gently adjusting the bandage on his side and ensuring that the monitors were all reading correctly. Sarah watched quietly, her eyes never leaving Max's face. The nurse smiled softly at her, offering words of reassurance, but Sarah could barely focus on them. All that mattered was Max's recovery, nothing else. As the evening set in, the hospital room grew darker, the sun's light replaced by the soft glow of the overhead lamps. Sarah's exhaustion began to catch up with her, but she refused to leave Max's side. She wouldn't abandon him now, not when he had been there for her so many times. The bond they shared was unspoken, but it was profound. He had put himself in harm's way for her, and she would be here for him, no matter how long it took. Finally, as the night wore on, Max's breathing seemed to ease. It was slow, labored, but steady. The nurses checked on him once more before leaving the room, and Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. There was still so much uncertainty, so much fear about what the future might hold. But in that moment, as she gently rested her hand on Max's head, she felt a flicker of hope. He was still fighting just as he always had. And as the night settled in around them, Sarah whispered softly to her loyal companion, "Thank you, Max. Thank you for saving me. I'm not ready to say goodbye. Please, stay with me." Max's eyes were closed, but Sarah could almost feel the silent promise he had made to her. "I'm here. I'll always be here." And with that, she allowed herself a moment of peace, even if it was only fleeting. Max was a fighter. He had always been. And no matter what happened, she knew that he would fight for his life, just as he had fought to save hers. The days following the accident felt like an endless blur of emotions for Sarah. Each morning she woke to the sterile scent of the hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of the machines the only constant in her world. Max lay motionless beside her, his body battered from the impact, but his spirit, Sarah hoped, was still alive. Every time she closed her eyes, she could hear the screech of tires and feel the earth-shattering impact as Max had thrown himself in front of her. It was a sound that haunted her, a reminder of just how close she had come to losing him. She often found herself staring at Max, her hand resting gently on his side as if she could feel his strength returning through the light pressure of her touch. His breathing was still labored, but it had become steadier over time. The doctors had told her to be patient, that recovery would take time. But Sarah found it impossible to wait without feeling the weight of every moment, every second that passed in silence, the room heavy with the absence of sound that had once been filled with Max's protective growls, his gentle whines, and his soft paw steps. As she watched the machines beep rhythmically, Sarah's mind wandered back to the times when Max had been her shield, when he had been her constant companion through every trial and joy. She remembered the first time she had met him, the way his eager eyes had looked up at her with nothing but trust and affection, as if he had known from that very moment that they were meant to be together. Max had been with her through so many chapters of her life, through the quiet mornings, the rainy afternoons, the lonely nights when she had wondered if she would ever feel truly whole again. And through all of it, Max had been there, always watching, always listening, always protecting. He had kept her safe when the world seemed too dark, when sadness seemed to engulf her every thought. His love had never wavered, not once, and now she was faced with the reality that she could lose the one being who had given her so much of himself. It was impossible for Sarah to ignore how much Max meant to her. He wasn't just a dog, he was her family. He was more than a companion. He was the thread that had held her life together when everything else had seemed to unravel. And now, she couldn't bear the thought of living in a world without him. He had saved her life without a second thought, throwing himself in front of that speeding car, and now, as she sat at his side, all she could do was return the favor and hope, pray, that he would pull through. The first few days were the hardest. Max remained unconscious, his condition critical. Sarah rarely left his side. She slept in the chair next to his bed, her hand resting on his fur, even when the doctors insisted she get some rest. She couldn't bring herself to leave him, not when he needed her so much. She spoke to him, even though she wasn't sure he could hear her. "I'm here, Max," she whispered through her tears. "You don't have to fight alone. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here with you, every step of the way." The doctors had told her that Max had sustained a number of injuries. His ribs were bruised, his side was badly wounded from the impact, and there was swelling in his abdomen. His body had taken the full brunt of the collision, and recovery would take time. But Sarah didn't care about the time. It didn't matter how long it took, as long as Max was still breathing, as long as he was still fighting. Days passed, and Sarah's hope began to waver with every moment Max remained still, every time the machine beside his bed let out a soft beep. It was a sound that felt like it was keeping time with her own heartbeat, each pulse a reminder that things were far from over. But slowly things began to change. One morning, just as the first light of dawn broke through the blinds, Sarah sat by Max's side, watching the way his chest moved. She noticed a slight change, a deeper rise and fall of his ribcage, a steadier rhythm to his breathing. She leaned in closer, her hand brushing against his fur, willing herself to believe that he was getting better. And then it happened. Max's eyes fluttered open. They were slow, groggy, and unfocused at first, but they were open. And as Sarah leaned in closer, holding her breath, Max's eyes met hers. It was a faint flicker of recognition, but it was enough. The dog she had known, the dog who had protected her so fiercely, was still with her. Max was still there. "Max," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Max, you're awake." Max's tail gave a small, weak wag. It wasn't much, just a gentle movement of his back end, but it was enough to send a wave of relief crashing over Sarah. She felt tears prick at her eyes, but this time, they were tears of gratitude. Max was still with her. As the days continued, Max's condition slowly improved. His eyes grew brighter, and his movements, though stiff, became more purposeful. It wasn't fast, nothing about his recovery was quick, but every small change, every improvement, felt like a victory. Sarah remained at his side, talking to him, encouraging him. She knew that Max's strength wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. She had always been his rock, his constant companion, and now, it was time for her to help him heal, just as he had always done for her. And slowly, Max began to show signs of his former self. His head would lift from his pillow, his ears would perk up at the sound of a familiar voice, and his eyes, though still a little cloudy, began to focus more clearly. It was as if he knew the road ahead would be long, but he was ready to take it, step by step. One afternoon, just over a week after the accident, Max lifted his head again, his eyes locking with Sarah's. This time, it wasn't just a faint flicker of recognition, it was full consciousness, full awareness. He looked at her with those familiar, trusting eyes, and Sarah felt her heart swell. The same eyes that had always watched over her, that had always been there to protect her, were looking at her again as if to say, "I'm not done yet." Max had always been a fighter, and now, more than ever, he proved it. He wasn't giving up. Not on Sarah, not on life, not on his role as her protector. "Good boy," Sarah whispered, her voice full of emotion as she reached out to gently stroke his head. "You're going to make it. I know you are." Max gave a low, soft whine, his tail twitching in response, as though to acknowledge her words. He wasn't quite himself yet, but it didn't matter. The bond between them, the love and loyalty that had been forged over so many years, was stronger than anything else. Max was healing, and as he began to recover, Sarah felt something inside her heal as well. The fear, the panic, the worry, they were all still there, but they were beginning to fade, replaced by the same quiet trust she had always placed in Max. The road to full recovery was still long, and Sarah knew that. Max would need rest, therapy, and time to regain his strength. But for the first time since the accident, Sarah could breathe a little easier. She could see that Max wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. He had saved her life, and now, it was her turn to help him heal. And no matter how long it took, Sarah knew she would be there every step of the way, just as Max had been there for her. The days had passed with a quiet, tentative sense of calm settling over Sarah and Max. While the world outside seemed to go on, time in their small corner of Riverside had slowed. Max was steadily recovering from his injuries, each day marking a small victory in his healing process. Though still weak and slow, he was moving around more, wagging his tail on occasion, and occasionally mustering the energy to give a soft bark when a squirrel passed by their window. For Sarah, each moment with Max, each sign that he was returning to the dog she knew and loved, was a gift, a relief. But just as they were beginning to regain a sense of normalcy, the universe threw another curveball their way. It was late afternoon when it happened, the sun beginning its descent, casting a golden glow across the streets of Riverside. Sarah had just finished preparing dinner when she smelled smoke. At first, it was faint, almost imperceptible, like the smell of burning leaves in the distance. But as the minutes passed, the smell grew stronger, thicker, and more acrid. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, and her mind raced with dread. She opened the kitchen window to get a better sense of where the smoke was coming from, and her worst fear was realized. The apartment building across the street was engulfed in flames. Panic surged through Sarah as she stared out the window, her eyes fixed on the thick plumes of smoke rising into the sky. She knew the building well. It was home to several of her elderly neighbors, including Mrs. Finch, a kind woman who had lived across from Sarah for years. Sarah's hands trembled as she quickly grabbed her phone to call 911, her mind spinning. She needed to act fast. Max, who had been lying on his bed nearby, raised his head at the sound of Sarah's frantic movements. His ears perked up, and his eyes, though still tired, focused on her with an intensity that said he was ready to go, no matter the cost. He had been resting and recovering, but his protective instincts had never dulled. The fire, the danger, It was enough to awaken the warrior inside him. Without a second thought, Sarah grabbed her coat and dashed for the door. Her mind was focused solely on getting to the neighbors, ensuring they were safe. She didn't know what she would do when she reached the building, but she couldn't stand by and do nothing. Max, despite his injuries, was already on his feet, his body tense and alert. The instinct that had once saved her life was now flaring up again. He could feel the urgency in Sarah's movements, and he understood the danger. Ignoring the lingering pain in his side, Max followed Sarah out the door, his paws patting heavily on the pavement as they made their way toward the fire. The air was thick with smoke, making it hard to breathe. The heat from the flames burned against Sarah's skin, and the crackling of the fire filled the air like a deafening roar. She could feel the heat on her face as she approached the building, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Max was right beside her, his body moving with purpose, his ears pinned back as he sensed the danger around them. His eyes never wavered from Sarah, constantly checking to make sure she was safe, guiding her through the smoke and chaos. As they reached the entrance, Sarah froze. The building was swarming with panic-stricken residents, some already outside, but others still trapped on the upper floors. The flames had already engulfed the lower levels, and it was unclear whether everyone had made it out. Max's instincts kicked in again. Without hesitation, he moved forward, his body pushing Sarah out of the way as he barreled into the building. Sarah called after him, her heart pounding in her chest, but Max wasn't stopping. The moment he stepped into the smoke-filled hallway, his protective drive took over. "Max, no!" Sarah shouted, but Max was already on the move. His steps were deliberate, focused, despite the pain still lingering from his injuries. His breathing was heavier now, but his mission was clear. He was going to save Sarah. He was going to protect her, just as he always had. Max's growls filled the air, his deep voice cutting through the chaos. He bounded through the smoke, his nose to the ground, sniffing out the danger. He wasn't just trying to get Sarah out, he was ensuring no one was left behind. As Sarah stumbled through the dark hallway, she heard the faintest cries coming from one of the upper floors. Without thinking, Max made a beeline for the stairs, his paws scrabbling against the old wood, determined to get to whoever needed help. Sarah followed, her heart in her throat, her every step weighed down by fear. The flames were growing louder, the sound of the building creaking under the pressure of the fire. She could feel the heat at her back, but Max kept moving, his head held high, his body moving like a force of nature. He knew there was no time to waste. As they reached the second floor, the smoke thickened, the air so heavy it was almost impossible to breathe. Max, who had always been so alert, seemed to sense something, his body halting abruptly in front of a closed door. He growled low in his throat, and Sarah, her chest tightening with anxiety, pushed forward. "Max, what is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. But Max had already pressed his body against the door, pawing at it desperately. Sarah, her heart racing, threw open the door, and there, in the dark, was Mrs. Finch, trapped in her apartment, unable to move. "Mrs. Finch!" Sarah cried out, rushing to her side. But Max was already there, his strong body nudging Mrs. Finch's limp form, guiding her toward the door with a determined push. Max didn't hesitate. He'd found the weak point, and now he was leading them out. Despite the pain from his previous injuries, his loyalty was unmatched, and his instincts were razor-sharp. Every step, every action, was calculated. He was moving with purpose, protecting those he loved, ensuring their safety. With Max leading the way, Sarah and Mrs. Finch made their way back to the staircase. The flames were closing in, the air thick and choking, but Max was unfazed. His instincts, honed by years of service, told him that he had to get them out, and that's exactly what he did. The fire continued to rage, but Max's strength didn't waver. His loyalty and determination saw them safely to the front of the building, where the paramedics and firefighters were waiting. Mrs. Finch, gasping for breath, was immediately whisked away to safety, but Max and Sarah remained, standing together in the smoke-filled night. Max stood, though his legs trembled from exhaustion and pain. He was hurt, but he had done his job. He had protected Sarah again, just as he always had. His loyalty, his courage, were beyond anything Sarah could have ever imagined. He had given everything to keep her safe, even when the world seemed to be falling apart around them. As Sarah stood beside him, her hand resting on his back, she realized that the bond they shared was deeper than she had ever known. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a hero, her hero. And no matter what happened next, she would never forget the sacrifices he had made, the love he had shown, and the loyalty that had saved them both. Weeks passed since the fire, and the world around Sarah and Max slowly began to return to some semblance of normalcy. The scent of charred wood and smoke had faded from their apartment, and the fire that had so nearly taken everything from them was now just a memory. But the bond between Sarah and Max, shaped by his loyalty, bravery, and undying protection, was something that could never be erased. It had been tested to its limits, and yet it had only grown stronger. Their emotional healing would take time, but Sarah knew, deep down, that she had already been changed forever. Max's recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. When he had first been brought back to the hospital after the accident, barely able to lift his head, Sarah feared she might lose him. But now, as she watched him gingerly walk around the house, his once limp body slowly but surely regaining its strength, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the way he had fought for her, time and time again. His recovery was slow, but it was steady. Each day brought a little more energy, a little more life back to him, and Sarah felt her own heart heal with every step Max took. Max had always been a strong dog. His German Shepherd physique, his sharp instincts, and his unwavering loyalty had all made him the perfect protector. But now, as Sarah observed him limping across the living room, his once strong legs a little slower than before, she was reminded of the sacrifices he had made. His bravery, his selfless act of throwing himself in front of that speeding car, had left a mark on him. But in that limp, in that small sign of weakness, Sarah saw not just the toll the accident had taken, but also the enduring strength Max had shown through it all. He had done the unimaginable for her, and now, as he recovered, she vowed to do the same for him. Despite the limp that remained as a reminder of his battle, Max's spirit had returned. He was once again following Sarah from room to room, sitting by her feet as she worked, and looking up at her with those familiar, trusting eyes. He was a warrior, and even in his recovery, his protective instincts remained as sharp as ever. Sarah often found herself looking down at him with a mix of awe and gratitude. Max wasn't just a dog, he was a hero, her hero. Their walks, once a simple part of their daily routine, had become even more meaningful. Sarah had learned to cherish every moment, each step they took together, each look exchanged between them, and every sign that Max was healing and thriving. She had always known that life could change in an instant, but now she truly understood the value of the simple things. Their walks, though slower than before, had become sacred. As Sarah watched Max move beside her, his eyes alert and his gait still a little unsteady, she felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. They were both healing together. Max's full recovery was more than just physical. He had endured so much: the trauma of the car accident, the pain of the fire, and the mental and emotional toll of being the one who had kept her safe. Yet through it all, he never wavered. He had given everything, and now it was Sarah's turn to give back. She was there for him every step of the way, just as he had been there for her when it mattered most. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself reflecting on the profound impact Max had had on her life. It wasn't just the protection he had given her, it was the unwavering loyalty, the deep love, and the quiet courage that had changed her. When Max had thrown himself in front of that car to save her, he had not just saved her life. He had shown her the true meaning of love and loyalty, of putting someone else's well-being above your own. Max had given her a gift that no one else could ever give. He had reminded her that love was powerful, that it could transcend anything: pain, fear, even death. Sarah sat quietly on the couch one evening, Max curled up at her feet, his body still showing signs of the accident, but his eyes filled with the same love he had always carried for her. She ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the warmth of his body under her touch, and her heart swelled with emotion. She thought about all the years they had spent together, the good times, the bad, and everything in between. And in that moment, she realized that the greatest gift Max had given her wasn't just his protection. It was the reminder that love, loyalty, and courage could change everything. Max had saved her life, yes, but more than that, he had shown her the kind of person she wanted to be. He had taught her to be brave, to trust, and to always fight for what mattered. Max's actions had deepened her understanding of the world, of what it meant to be loyal and devoted, and of the strength that could be found in love. As she looked down at Max, his head resting on her lap, Sarah's thoughts turned to the future. She had no idea what the days ahead would hold, but one thing was certain: she would never take her bond with Max for granted again. He had given her everything when it mattered most, and now, she would give everything she had to ensure that he was never alone in his struggle. Their journey was far from over. They had both faced trials, they had both been tested, but together, they were stronger than ever. Max's healing had shown Sarah that there was no challenge too great, no obstacle too insurmountable, as long as they had each other. And no matter what came next, Sarah knew that they would face it together, just as they always had. As Sarah stood by Max's side, watching him take one step after another, she realized that the pain, the fear, and the uncertainty of the past months were all fading into the distance. What remained was the bond between them, unbreakable, unwavering, and stronger than anything life could throw their way. With each passing day, Max grew stronger, and Sarah's gratitude grew deeper. She didn't know what the future would hold, but as long as she had Max by her side, she knew they could face anything. The journey of healing was not just about recovering from the physical wounds, it was about understanding the profound emotional connection they shared, the quiet strength they drew from each other, and the love that had saved them both. Max had taught Sarah that no matter what happened, no matter how hard life got, they would always have each other. And that, she realized, was all they truly needed. Max's story is more than just the tale of a dog and his owner. It is a powerful reminder of the unbreakable bond that can exist between a person and their pet, a bond that transcends mere companionship and becomes something far deeper. Through his bravery, loyalty, and selflessness, Max demonstrated the purest form of love, the kind that is willing to put everything on the line for the safety and well-being of another. In the chaos of life's challenges, Max's actions revealed a truth we often overlook: the simple, profound power of loyalty and love. It is easy to take for granted those who love us, our friends, family, and pets, who quietly stand by our side through thick and thin. But Max's heroism forced Sarah, and all of us who follow their story, to reflect on the quiet sacrifices made by those who never ask for recognition but give everything for the ones they love. Max didn't hesitate to risk his life to protect Sarah. He acted on instinct, driven by a bond so powerful that it transcended the fear of pain and the possibility of death. His actions speak to the depth of loyalty we can find in animals, and perhaps even in ourselves if we allow ourselves to embrace that level of love and devotion. What Max taught Sarah, and what we can all take away from this story, is that love is not passive. Love is not just about affection or kind words. Love is about action. It's about stepping forward in the face of danger, putting someone else's needs before your own, and standing by them even when the world seems to be falling apart. In this sense, Max didn't just protect Sarah. He taught her the true meaning of selfless love, reminding her that the most valuable things in life aren't things at all, but the people and animals who make it worth living. As Max continues to heal, Sarah, too, has found herself in the process of rebuilding. Rebuilding not just her life, but the very core of what she values: love, loyalty, and the strength that comes from standing by those who need you most. Their journey has not been easy, but it has been a testament to the resilience of both the human spirit and the incredible, unspoken bond between a dog and its owner. So, as we close this chapter, let's take a moment to reflect on the power of loyalty and love. Let Max's story remind us of the strength we can draw from those who walk beside us, whether on four legs or two, and the sacrifices they make to keep us safe even when we don't ask them to. Now, we want to hear from you. Has your dog ever saved you? Do you have a story of loyalty, love, or sacrifice that has touched your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories of loyalty and love. Max's story is one of many, and we're here to share even more. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that Max's journey has touched your heart as deeply as it has ours.